Okay, welcome everybody. I am just getting ready to go live on Instagram. This is Traci Rubel from Sidewalk Talk, bringing together people that I really respect and admire to talk about power, rank, and privilege in our interpersonal relationship. We hope that this is a conversation of inquiry. And why I wanted to bring this conversation up is because it's up. Power is happening between us all the time. And I'm hoping to learn something and be changed. And I hope that you'll come to this conversation willing to be open, to learn something and be changed. I was reading Juanita's website before coming, and she talked about the importance of connecting in the space before actually engaging. And I'm going to do my own way of connecting in the space and read a poem. May I read a poem? Would that be okay? This is by Elizabeth Alexander. It's called Praise Song for the Day. It was read at Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, "Take out your pencils. Begin." We encounter each other in words, words spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider and reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone and then others who said, "I need to see what's on the other side. I know there's something better down the road. We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see." And that again is Elizabeth Alexander. So welcome everyone. And I want to start off with a question that I did send to everyone ahead of time. So we did do a little bit of community prep work. And the opening question is for everyone here to maybe make an introduction and answer this question. How does power, privilege, and rank, as you understand it, impact your interpersonal connections in your private and work life right now? And I'm going to put this question in the chat for those watching live. And who would like to start us off? Come on, brave souls. Do you want me to read the question again? Do you want me to flip a coin?
I can
Sadaf? Yes, I knew you would. I just got to tell you something funny about Sadaf. I said to her at the end of an interview last week, I said, "You know you're a badass, right?" She said, "Yes, I know I am."
Yeah. So I remember writing to you in response to the document you shared, asking us to reflect on this question. And I think power has been a bit difficult for me to step into, actually, because of seeing a lot of misuse of power at home, um, and sort of in the jobs I worked, how the superiors or bosses would behave. I think Aryan and I started from a very guilty position when starting our organization, both guilty and in a sort of rescuing position, and I think we set the wrong precedent because, and only today I was talking to this client where I was telling her that, people we lead, or people who are depending on us somehow, as children, as employees, or as any subordinate position, they they need us to also provide the structure and the exceptions to that structure based on a case to case basis. But I think for me, that is something that I'm learning, that structure is not necessarily bad. And stepping into power means that you don't automatically sort of misuse the structure, but also you don't automatically let go of the structure, but have the frame and then make exceptions to it where required. So I think that's what I'm learning about power as a leader right now. And I think in other relationships, I've perhaps gained power by providing, being needed, being the person who is understanding, caring, who's the rock and the sort of 3 a.m. friend for people, and so on and so forth. So it was a bit scary to not do that and see what happens. So a bit of this year has also been about seeing what relationships survive and in what form if I stop being the automatic provider. So that's also been a shift in how I'm trying to access power in relationships these days. And one more thought I'd like to share is that there is a sense of seeing the submissive, oppressive, or non powerful party in the typical sense, if we see it in a binary, as if they don't have power, But I do feel like maybe as a culture, we perhaps decide to give some people the responsibility and the risk of leading, and then to compensate for the risk that comes with leading, perhaps we provide power and privilege, which does get misused. But it also seems like a cultural transaction. We all agree maybe to that structure, then it gets out of hand, and then we have movements and all to sort of fix that misuse. But it does feel like a transaction that takes place both ways. It doesn't feel like those who are submissive, oppressed, don't have power, because if that were the case, then change movements would never be able to take place. So those are some thoughts I've had around this question.
Thank you, Sadaf. And you were a psychotherapist in Mumbai, yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. Who would like to go next?
I can catch the ball just like I'm wearing glasses as well, as Tracy's wearing glasses, Sadaf is wearing glasses. So, Dawn, you're going to go next. Um, my name's Sarah. I'm calling from Rotterdam, the Netherlands. Um, and I love this question. So for me, it has different components, right? Power is for me, um, as so many before me, just like Dawn and Liz have told me, like power is the ability to get things done. And privilege is like the power in a certain context that will give you access to the resources more easier than the other. And the rank is that accumulation of the power, but that is in a way like contextual and situational depending on the field that you're in. So like having a tan in here in Europe might give you the impression like, oh, you went on a vacation. But if I've been in Taiwan, they'll be like, you'll be out in the sun too much. Are you a farmer or something like that? So the rank is really different. And for me, it really is in interpersonal relationships about that awareness. And I love what Kanita said once, like the one with the awareness is the one that have to do the work in a way. So for me, having high rank in interpersonal relationship means having the responsibility to share that ease that comes with your power, but also really to embody the curiosity in like leaning in to the other that might be lower rank in that context, because there's also something to learn from the other side. And for me, it comes with the image. It's like when a kid goes to the kindergarten, the teacher might be like literally higher rank, because the person is taller. But will you go a little bit like really make contact? Hey, I see you. How nice that you're here, to really share that ease, but also be curious, like, hey, and what are you seeing? So how can we be fluid in our relationship, and that I can own my ease and share my ease, but also be willing to learn from you. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sarah. Amazing. I just got a little lesson on power, rank, and privilege. Awesome. Should we go the glasses route and
Thanks
go to
for the
Dawn next?
call out. I'm coming. I'm coming. Traci, I just have to thank you for, bringing us all together, and I really think the idea of sidewalk chat is so cool. talking to people, the need for people to be listened to. So I just have to appreciate you, and so much a pleasure to be with people on this panel and meet new people, a couple people I know here, and really appreciated you, Sadaf, starting us off, and of course, Sarah's wisdom. I'll just add, maybe there's so much on the theme that we can say, but since the question was specifically about how does it impact interpersonal connections, for me, what I would like to highlight is freedom. How free do we feel with people? It's like a central thing for me. Sometimes I'm all nervous and I'm a mess with people. Has nothing to do uh, maybe with my accomplishments in life, but it has to do with all kinds of things, because there's different kinds of power. There's our social power, there's our positional and contextual power, and there's also our personal power. And there are many times in life where I feel at ease and relaxed with people. I feel free. So when we talk about the impact interpersonally, I'm trying to be aware of that. How free do people feel with me? Free do I feel with them? And if they don't feel free with me, can I notice that? For example, yesterday, I mean, just thinking of this, yesterday I was with a colleague, a friend, a colleague. She was telling me of some work project she was going to do. I have more experience than her in that area. She looks to me sometimes for support. So I just freely gave my opinion. I feel free. It's structured a little bit in our relationship. I felt free to just say what I think. But then there's a little quiet on her end. And I notice, well, I don't want her to just take in what I'm saying, right? Even though there's mutual respect, I want her to feel free also in reaction to me. So I said to her, well, what do you think about this? Please don't feel like you have to take what I'm saying. Please tell me your thoughts. I genuinely want to hear them. And that the rank situation and my experience could have structured, you see, the conversation in such a way where I have a lot of freedom to say what I want, and her subtle signals are not as free. So interpersonally, seeing my impact is to notice those signals in her and to support her on the other side of that. And I just have one more point to make, because I know we're trying to keep brief, but I just want to say here, for me, I work a lot with families and young people, and I'm a parent, and it's been like, a highlight of my life. And how we treat children in regard to power is really deeply important to me. And how we encourage people as parents. How aware are we with our power? When we tell kids something, can we encourage them in their relationship to us? And parents often forget that we are the first authorities. We are the first power folks, right, in the child's life. And I always tell parents when I work with them, hey, if your kid isn't free to bring in an opinion with you or to disagree, don't you expect them to stand up to peer pressure. They won't be able to do it. So we are the playground for all of that. So yeah, there's so much to say, but I'll pass the ball. How about if I make it easy? Eric, I don't know you. You want to say something?
Sure, I'd be
All
happy
right.
to join this conversation. I'm really honored to be here with all of you. I'm coming from north of Berkeley in California in the United States, on the unceded ancestral home of the Lisjan Ohlone people. And in terms of how I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, I primarily work with relationship and sexual issues. And when I think about power as a broad framework, I think about influence, the ability for your words, your needs, your gifts to move what's happening in the relationship. And when I moved into that thought, I realized that a lot of dialectics emerged for me. Is a person motivated to seek influence because of an experience internally of fear or love? Are they motivated to pursue influence out of abundance or scarcity? And what I noticed when I looked at my experience working with couples is that when fear or a desire for control is motivating the pursuit of influence, it tends to be fleeting and it tends to be fragile. I become afraid that my ability to have influence will be taken away from me and somebody else will gain the levers of power or control. But if I'm motivated out of love and connection, then my influence endures and I find it easy to cede the floor, to listen to the needs or the influence and be influenced as well. And so when that shows up in couples, a lot of the conversation about rank comes in about who perceives themselves as having skill in whatever's happening in the relationship, who perceives their partner as having influence in the relationship. And a lot of what I work with is people who are unaware of their power and influence through the levers of critique, feedback, through speaking louder, being physically bigger, holding positions or identities of power or privilege like race or identity. And the unconsciousness of that, like Quintana said earlier in our conversation, the unconsciousness of that can make it so that the other person has to do even more work. And a lot of what I do is to try to help each member of a couple come into an awareness of their power and influence, and then into skillful holding of their influence so that each person in a couple can hold equal rank with each other. I think that's a good place to stop.
Thanks, Eric.
I'll continue to follow Dawn's model and offer Aryan, would you like to speak next?
Okay. For me, I mean, I don't know as yet what power is. In the culture, in the family, I think whenever we think about power, we always think about authority, power over. But I feel sometimes it's not that. It's just being. It's just being silent. A lot of, I feel when you are with yourself inside, I think that's also very powerful. I mean, I don't even know if that can be called as power. Also, my association with power is very difficult. So I feel like I'm constantly blurring the line of the power that is useful and the power that is not useful, and not so much in binary also, but I mean just being. I mean, sometimes like we are so, like right now also when you talk about when everybody is using also the word like power and privilege, I feel very pressured. Oh my god, like some big thing has happened. I mean, it creates a lot more fear to me to intellectualizing power. I think I don't want to intellectualize it. I just want to be, see how, like in the body. I think it's just being. Like that's the little understanding that I have. Little thing. I otherwise talking about it is very difficult for me. Like I don't have a definition actually. I don't see it like I'm not able to see it in one way for myself or even for other people. So I don't know. Maybe not defining it is what is probably power, but it is more into action and being. I don't know if this makes any sense.
Aryan, I'm sitting here with like 3 process workers on the call, and I'm not a process worker, I'm a student, but all I know is that you used a lot of movement and hand gestures saying, I don't know how to describe power. And I couldn't not say that of this, a lot of this. And I just had to just sort of try on your power that this for a second.
Yes. I'm very animated. Like I can't talk without moving my hands. So, yeah, I'm very animated as a person.
Well, thank you for letting me honor my teachers that are here on this call by demonstrating I've been a good student by tracking your hand movements too. Do you want to pick who's going to do it? We have Juanita and Liz.
Liz.
Thanks, Ariane. I mean, Traci, process worker is like a fluid role too, right? Like I wasn't paying attention at all to Ariane's gestures, and I was just like listening, going, "Oh yeah." Yes, I'm Liz from in Australia, in Naarm, it's Melbourne, on Wurundjeri land, and I mean the question about how does power, rank, and privilege impact interpersonal connections? Like I just kind of go, how doesn't it? It's like for me, it feels everywhere and very complex. And I love what you were saying too, Ariane. Like I do have a definition. I could talk about power for hours theoretically, right? But on the other hand, it's like I don't really get it either. Like the embodied experience is so entangled and enmeshed in, you know, because we talk about things like being systemic or interpersonal or intrapsychic. It's like they don't exist actually. Like the lived embodied experience of relationality and power and stuff, it's like it's all mushed in complex internal experiences that are kind of playing out in behaviors and interactions. So on one hand, like I feel like I get something, and another hand I sometimes don't. And I didn't really know how to answer the question because I was just going to be vague and say, oh, it's complex. But something caught my attention in the poem, Traci, at the start about catching each other's eye. And I thought, well, that's a moment where power is playing out and rank is playing out about who gets to catch whose eye, you know, walking down the street. And it made me think of an experience I have, right, when I'm walking to the shops and I might pass a man on the street. And in the moment, I kind of feel like, yeah, patriarchy is requiring me to acknowledge your existence here. I have to kind of make some kind of eye contact or smile at you or acknowledge you somehow. Like I feel that as a woman that I am supposed to do that. So of course I want to do it. I'm just like, I want to pretend this person doesn't exist. Actually, because I don't want to be forced to have to do that. It feels oppressive in the moment, right? But then my own values, I really value community friendliness. And I think the acknowledging of each other in public and is really important, right, to being a really kind of safe and healthy and friendly culture. I really like that. So in that moment, that kind of power issue around, you know, gender and whatever puts me in a little bit of a complex or conflict against my own personal values. And I don't have an answer for it. I still don't know what to do in those moments. What's going to be kind of good for me. But I guess I just, in terms of the impact, I think the complexities of different kinds of power and rank experience often puts us in like just difficult inner conflicts, which come out then relationally. Sometimes we don't know how to behave relationally because we're in this kind of like, I don't know what to do here. I want to do this and I don't want to do that. And yeah, I don't have an answer, but it gets complicated sometimes. Juanita.
Yes. So first of all, one of the things Sarah said about, you know, I've been taught by my teachers, the responsibility is always on the one most healed, because you can see more of the picture than the people who aren't. And so often what we're doing is we're waiting on someone else to react, and they're just showing up from their wound. And so they can't see as much. One of the things that I speak a lot about is that we're all swimming in the water of what's right, real, and true is white and male. And the problem with that equation is it often takes the divine and nature out of the equation. And so it's not complete, but then we use it as a yardstick to measure everything. So even who's privileged. And I would say, we're such an adolescent adult culture. And the problem with that is if you don't have initiated adults, you can't have initiated elders. And if you don't have initiated elders, you can't initiate the youth. And so it becomes this vicious cycle of adolescent adults growing adolescent adults. And so for me, part of growing up is picking your own yardstick. And, so with my yardstick, it's not, I don't call people who are white privileged or who have a particular position privileged, because in my yardstick, it's not privilege to be disconnected from your heart. And, but depending on what yardstick you use is how we can define those things. So what we've been doing is we've just been creating the same iterations of the same thing over and over again. Like people will say, they're showing up, they want to be my ally. And I said, I don't want you to be my ally. I want you to save your own damn self. Until you realize that this system hurts you, we're all screwed. Because if you can give me my power back, then it's not real. It's not mine, because then you can take it away. And I think we often, when we're talking about power, we talk about positional power and not internal power. But you can't talk about one without the other, because I think the external reflects the internal. And so as we grow and heal the internal, the external changes. Who's around us change. And until we really get how much power we have, and I actually think most of us are afraid of our power, because then we have to step into that responsibility. I'll say one more piece. It's just that in this culture, I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, I'm in the US, and the story we have is that white people are supposed to be perfect. And so they avoid the mess of actually doing the healing to step in their own internal power. And people of color never will be. And so they cling to the mess because, and avoid stepping into claiming their wisdom that they've gained. And so part of the healing, I think, is healing those pieces. That's me.
Well, I can't wait to hear you speak some more, Miss Juanita. That was pretty cool. May I take a stab at answering this as your facilitator? I'm going to speak from my story. Power for me was always harm. Whoever had it was the person that harmed. And so for me, my relationship to power is complicated, right? Because for me, it's bad. So you better not have any personal power. And I'm not so sure how I feel about people that have the power. And what that means then is, well, then what the heck am I doing in my life? Because I don't have it for myself, and I certainly judge and, prosecute other people that have it, because to me it's all bad. I'm not saying that I believe that anymore, but I'm saying that lives inside of me, that relationship to power. I think Eric and I even early, I'm going to tell a story about me and Eric to illuminate how this BS shows up. Taking full responsibility for myself and completely tooting your horn. We were consulting on a case, and I emailed him. I said, hey, let's have this call. And he responds back very politely, but very professionally. And I went, and I was very leaderly like with this case. I was very powerful. And I was feeling ashamed of how I had used my power with this case. And I was projecting my shame onto Eric. So we get into our consult call. Eric has a different relationship to his power. And I said, well, I hope you're not mad at me. He said, why would I be mad at you? I said, well, because I was, kind of ballsy with this case. And he said, hey, Traci, did I do something in my power with you that would make you think that I would be mad at you for being powerful? And I just wanted to say thank you for that, because it was really meaningful to me that you were tracking that. But I just wanted to illuminate some of the weird shit that goes on inside of me around power, that power equals harm. And I'm doing a lot of work, and that's why now you know why I had y'all on this call. Yeah. So before I enter in with another question, we can take this wherever we want to go. Someone might want to riff on something that someone said. So please, let's just take a pause and riff away.
I was thinking about what Quanita and you were talking about, and I think I and Aryan have had this conversation amongst us that we don't experience patriarchy or caste or class as this sort of big monster that's going to come and meet us on the road, right? We experience all these systems in our relationships. So it's the mother, the friend, the father, the colleague who is going to be patriarchal, who is going to be homophobic or transphobic or whatever. So the systems are going to show up in our relationships actually, right? It isn't this abstract construct we'll meet outside somewhere, and we have more sort of agency in that 2 or 3 or 4 person relationship, which we sometimes forget because we think that the systemic oppression is so big. So I can't change patriarchy, so what's the point, sort of thing. But the interface with patriarchy is probably in a relationship, and there we do have some agency. So it's that power that gets spoken about quite less, about what we can do in these smaller ecosystems that we exist in. Just because we can't erase that systemic problem doesn't mean we shouldn't engage here in the 2 3 4 person unit. um, and especially I think it shows up when we're trying to speak to young therapists, because we just had to let go of somebody who's been an observer with us. He is training to be a therapist, but we didn't find like it was a good fit with our organization, so he finished his observership and he left. And one of the things when we did the exit call, I think Aryan asked him, something you liked about us and something you didn't like or want us to change or improve. And he was saying that, because y'all are so powerful in the hierarchy, because y'all are leading, we are learning, whatever you say can make us go into shame. And so sometimes, when you tell us something, it may be true, but it induces a lot of shame in me. And this is because Aryan had seen him deal with a sort of client he was seeing as part of his learning at his course in a certain way, and told him that it feels like you're probably caught up in too much of your stuff to kind of do justice to this client. So the best thing you can do here is perhaps to stop harm. You may not be able to do anything else given the situation in your life, but the best thing we can do here is probably stop harm. And it was funny that he acted on Aryan's advice and changed his therapeutic style or stopped working with that client, but still said that it induced shame. So it's interesting how sometimes we, especially in a receiving position, may want change to always feel good. And it may feel like if anybody in a position of power speaks to us, we have to go into shame or see it from a sense of inferiority. So there is a sense of fragility that I sometimes sense when speaking to younger folks, is that because something is not comfortable or it makes you rethink about your skills, your style, your position, it automatically feels like the person in power has misused the power. But change is going to feel a little odd or difficult, right? To think in a range would be useful. This feels difficult to hear, and they actively sort of use words that were berating. There is a wide range between those two, and sometimes when it's just uncomfortable, it can feel like it's shaming.
Thank you. It reminds me of Aryan. I love what you share about being in the body, and it reminds me of a dance. I think you're a longtime friend, and Liz, you know her as well. Julie Diamond once said, "You can only be or act as powerful as you feel." Okay, so and I remember one of the first times I start to think about power was, I think it was like in the beginning of my being a career as a facilitator, and I was describing this session to my husband, and he said, "Oh, that sounds like you're very powerful." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no power here. I'm just, I'm the facilitator. I do the pro." And he was like, "Yeah, but that's a lot of power." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no power here." But there's something about the contextual or having the language or like this mental, it almost like if you don't have enough language, if you only know power is power over, then power over is all that you see. And if you have more language of power, but you're not embodying it, then those are just like jargons. Because you can have the best explanation about power, but when I'm in contact with you, you're not sharing that ease or you're not tracking those signals. I'm like, this is not authentic, or it feels like. So there's something about this, um, the knowing and the doing. Yeah, I'll stop there.
So I want to add, if that's okay. So yes, what you are saying is what I was trying to say, and I'm glad that you put it in a nice, neat way. Um, yes, because I feel that when we see just power over, um, and just as a topic of discussion, we lose the experience of it. And I feel that uh, it's very actually very different when we are doing it. It is not as, I think words are too little to define how we embody power, and I feel that is also one of the problems that I think the world is having at the moment is, we conceptualize power a lot, but we don't embody it. So when it comes into the real situations, the person who's talking so much about power and systemic operation in these big jargons is not even able to stand up for themselves because they're not embodying it. Like they have no experience, they don't have any modeling for that. So I
Yeah.
do feel that right now it is all becoming about conceptualizing and talking, but not experiencing it, and not like we're not submitting to it. We're so fearful of it. We need to also submit ourselves to power. And say that, okay, how does it look like? The submission itself is power. Then the submission itself will become powerful. So I do feel like, and this is what I've very recently learned, like how submission is power, and Sadaf is the one who has made me look at it in that way. But yes, so we always talk about power in the way of giving it, but not receiving person. Like, how do I feel when I receive somebody which is powerful, or what is powerful, or somebody who is powerful? So we always talk about one person who is powerful. We never talk about two people, one having using the power and other one is receiving the power. And the narrative of receiving power is absolutely absent, unfortunately. So I think I am thinking on those
Those
lines.
lines.
Can I say something? Is that okay?
Juanita's next. She's been waiting to get in
Okay,
there.
go, Juanita.
One of the things I want to say is I think we often mistake comfort for safety.
Yeah.
And we've moved into a culture that actually glorifies victimization. Instead of what communities, a part of communities' job is to remind us of the truth of who we are. And so to hold us in our power, one of my teachers would say, treat them like they're normal, but know that they're crazy. It's a piece of like, really hold the expectation of normalcy. I tell people, you're a grown ass person, so I'm not going to try to guess what you need because that's me playing your God, and I'm not your God. You know, the other thing is shame, blame, and guilt. To me, I think we've misunderstood shame, blame, and guilt. We think they're emotions, and they're not. They're actually where we go to hide from emotions. So when I hear them in the room, the first question I ask is, what are you trying not to feel? And often it's just deep grief and sadness. And often we'll take the shame, blame, or guilt so we don't have to take responsibility. And in a culture that's an adolescent adult culture, we want all of the freedoms and none of the responsibilities. But when, you know, responsibility is the ability to respond, you know? And so for me, that's stepping into our own agency. And I think we actually have been going backwards, and we're not teaching people to step into their own agency, or holding that piece, that expectation that they can. You know, I hold that vision for people long before they can see it on their own. Because if, you know, we don't understand often when we're jumping in for people, what we're saying is, I don't trust you to know that for yourself. Instead of, you know, instead of really trusting them to ask and say, I'm, you know, trusting you to ask for what you need. Or even asking the question, what do you need in this moment? So I'm not guessing and trying to figure it out for somebody.
Don, you still want to go, or are you digesting? You're on mute.
I am digesting. You're seeing me. Yes. So much of what Anita said and what Arjan said before, so many things are coming up all at once, and I just appreciate everyone. And it seems to me that, you know, we're all having our own, there's something similar of what we're talking about. I feel we're upholding the sense of an inner personal power. And for me, that is so important because, you know, when someone says something about, yeah, we're just using power conceptually. I think that was Arjan. And Juanita spoke in the beginning about finding your own yardstick. And I just feel like, for example, if I take my own marginalized identities in my life, you know, too often we look at power just in terms of social identity. And that's where all of these concepts are coming from, and this race to the bottom about who is more of a victim, which I personally don't think is very helpful. I understand it. I appreciate the different experiences that folks have had around social identity. But to tell you the truth, the fact that I'm 65, I grew up in a culture where being female around different aspects of who I was really tough, especially being an athlete, really hard in my day. Being like the only Jew in the town I grew up with, having like a horrific amount of anti-Semitism and bullying, and being in a lesbian relationship and being a mom and all of that. So I have my share of marginalized identities, and yet I wouldn't give up any one of them. Not even the time when I had 20 girls who were ready to beat the shit out of me and I got to beat up the leader. Not even then, because I got so much out of it. I have so much inner power and sense of myself, and that's my yardstick. So when people talk about different power of social identity and they relate a lot around social justice issues, personally, that leaves me feeling uninspired. And I'm sorry if I say that, and that's offensive to some. But I feel a lot of the concepts we use, for me, they don't hit the mark to help us develop our deepest powers. And they don't help us to be authentic with each other. So when I hear, just take the word privilege, like, okay, privilege. Usually I find in the discourses that I hear, people use it as an accusation, you're privileged. Or they use it as an apology. Oh, I'm so privileged. And I've been thinking about privilege lately. Privilege is random. It's random. We don't choose the race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, whatever thing. We don't choose any of that. You get your circumstances in life. Yeah? And then you make something of it. And you can see that the people who seem to be the most privileged, perhaps, in terms of social identity, in terms of advantages, they're not necessarily the most powerful. They're not the people who move hearts and minds. We all know that. So for me, cultivating those deepest powers are essential, and they're also what creates better relationship between us.
Go, Eric.
Ball to
All right.
someone, especially since I'm a basketball player, passing it to someone, whoever catches it.
I'm just going to come back to kind of highlighting the role of the body in the process. What power we have, what gifts we have, what influence we have comes from our ability to regulate what's happening in here. And whether that is that moment of receiving feedback, like you were talking about, Sadaf, and having that moment of shame come in, we can have those moments, and then the regulation is in here. That's where the work is first. That moment of being called out or challenged, that feedback that you haven't done something skillfully here. If we can regulate what's happening in here, then we can share whatever gifts, whatever love we have, and find the pathways, not just to individual power, but to shared influence and relationship inside of it. And I don't know what the terms fully meant for you, Quintana, but when you were talking about the initiated adult, I was sitting with that going, that's what it means to me to be the initiated adult, is that I can take that moment of hurt, of pain, of my reaction and my interpretations, and then I can come into this present moment and offer relationship and learn more about that moment and why that happened.
Can I speak what I mean about initiated adults? To me, if you think of the chakra system and think of the heart chakra, I think in the middle of the heart chakra, you think of it as an hourglass shape. The center of the hourglass is the place where initiation takes place. The bottom part of the heart chakra and the lower chakras are rooted in the earth. The upper part of the heart chakra and the upper chakras are rooted in the heavens. And what initiation asks of us is that we move from being earth-centered and led in our decision-making to being spirit-centered and led in our decision-making. We don't ignore the lower chakras, we just don't lead with them. Because when we lead with the lower ones, we'll betray the upper ones every time. And so that to me is where initiation happens, is that place in the heart.
Probably no accident that when I was speaking about that, I was putting my hand right there.
Yes. And I love, one of the things I'll say too that I love is between the heart, like our throat chakra is choice. You know, it's where we speak our voice into the world, and it's our choice. And I don't think it's by accident that it's between the head and the heart, because when those are in alignment, right, we can really be in integrity with ourselves and the world.
Yeah.
I was spotting you, Liz. I was just going to call you in.
Thank you. I mean, part of what, we're talking a lot about relationality, right? And for me, as someone who is, like, animism is a really, really big part of my life, my reality. And when I think about relationality, if I only think about it as in my interpersonal relationships with other humans, it's really, it's a really small window of thinking for me, because a lot of the things I'm really interested in as someone who kind of is trying to do my little bit to kind of repair Western culture is so much about that relationality with the sort of the more than or other than human world, as well as our relationship and our sense of superiority and exceptionalism to the rest of the world, all the other persons, right, who are not humans. And I think that's a huge place in which domination kind of is enacted, right? It is our relationship to the natural world, the relationship to, see people's relationships to their pets, to, insect. I just think it's a really, I don't even know what my point is, other than it sometimes drives me bonkers when this conversation is just about how I'm relating with other humans, because my relational world is so much bigger than my human-to-human relational world. And I think that's part of our problems around power, is that as humans, as a species, we've really exceptionalized ourselves as something kind of other than and better than, and that we can transcend and not have consequences from the way we interact with the natural world, right? we even have to have a language like it's the natural world and I'm not the natural world. It's like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So to kind of bring my like, it's so human centric. And I love it too. It's actually, it's how I earn a living. And but yeah.
And also, I think human centric in the way that we kind of quote unquote ideally want to see ourselves, right? So, not just human centric in the way we are, but our imagination of ourselves, which is sometimes very straight jacketed. Because a lot of conversations around power leave out both pleasure and badness, right? I'd read this once where there's this book by Amrita Narayanan on the female sexuality in India, and she was talking about how we've made it such an enjoyable role for women to complain that now it's no longer something that may not feel pleasurable anymore, you know. So there may be a pleasure that comes out of complaining, there may be a pleasure that comes out of participating in cycles of maybe oppression or abuse. And so that also needs to be looked at. When does that become pleasurable? And there are a lot of idealistic projects, like I don't know if you've heard of Auroville here in India. It was supposed to be, I think it was around the time of the free love movement and so on. And so it was a very idealistic city. It's going to be the best of all cultures and things like that. And when you read any material from there, their manifesto, the other publications, it always talks about the greatness and a very intellectual or cognitive sounding greatness, but it didn't make space for the fact that we also need pleasure and play, that we do enjoy a certain badness, which like animals tend to have a very free flowing relationship with these things, like their play, even if it gets aggressive. I think I was seeing a video where it said that when two cats or kittens are learning to play, if one is dominant and dominates a little too much, where it's going from play to proper rough aggression, they will automatically correct it within themselves and come back to like a 60-40 of rough and tumble play. So it feels like there is a freer flow with maybe animals, or especially animals that can be studied, between pleasure, power, play, and penchant for badness, which is protective. Whereas our idea of power, the human idea, is very ideal, of the straight jacketed, very noble idea of power, maybe.
Oh.
That's another pet in the pot.
Yeah.
We tend to have this myth of independence that I think comes into play here. And I think, Liz, I love what you were saying, because I think the myth of independence feeds into that, right? So this whole idea that we're not breathing the same air or walking on the same earth or drinking the same water, so, and I actually think the myth of independence is a trauma response,
Yeah.
because those things are always happening. We're always dependent. But then the question is whether we're standing in scarcity and lack, which is codependence, or love and abundance, which is interdependence. But it's always dependence. And there's a place on which we've forgotten the connection between doing our own healing work and our own grief work and compassion for others, because we can't give what we don't have. So if I don't have a level of love and care and compassion for myself, there's no way I can offer it to you or to the earth or to animals or any other place. And so the healing place, I think, is so important in this work of like how we interact with each other. And I think we act like that doesn't exist. We put people in dialogue and want them to have conversation and feel empathy for each other. And they don't even have it for themselves to give it to anybody. So we're skipping over that place. There's a guy, John Marshall Roberts, who wrote a book called Igniting Inspiration. And he talks about there's 3 ways to move something. Body to body is force, mind to mind is persuasion, and spirit to spirit is inspiration. It's to be inspired, to be in spirit. And so if you show up completely in a room, because we are connected, we say that, but it's like, what the hell does that mean on the earth? If you show up, get fully present in the room, what happens is your soul speaks directly to mine, and I don't even have a choice whether to come or not. And we keep trying to do the opposite. We keep trying to persuade people, which is really hard to do. But it's like, if we just got ourselves, we could bring everybody with us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. I just want to do a time check. I'd like to keep going. How many of you have time to keep going for another 20 minutes? Hands? Okay. I'm going to take the mic and say something. Juanita, I feel very emotional and teary right now. I feel an incredible amount of love for all of you. I feel kinship. I can't believe that we're all over the world. And I'm not saying this to, you know what, I am just a big sweetheart. I act all tough, but I'm really just a big sweetheart. So I'm just going to out myself now. So yeah, I'm feeling a lot of that love. My voice wants to say this. The thing that I said power is abuse, but what has changed in me is this, that when I see someone that's misusing their power, I wonder, what are you protecting? I wonder that. And I was turned on to this book called Why Patriarchy Persists. And it's so clear to me as I'm moving into some really intense places of being with profound levels of grief for myself, and not the boohoo, feel sorry for myself kind of grief. The kind of grief where my heart is broken, and then I go there into the center of it, and I feel so much grief for the world. It's incredibly cleansing. I know it sounds really masochistic, but it's not. That misuse of power is the protection against loss. That when we misuse power, we're protecting our hearts from ever knowing that somehow love could be perfect. We're protecting our hearts from knowing that we lose love. We're protecting our hearts from knowing that people die. We're protecting our hearts from knowing that people fail us. We're protecting our hearts from knowing that we're real shitheads to one another and we hurt each other. And so we'll misuse power. And I just, I'm sitting with that a lot these days, and I wanted to add that voice into the soup. Don't leave me hanging.
I mean, I think it was a powerful statement that integrated a number of different perspectives, right? The trauma response that you were talking about, Juanita, right? To heal that, we need to go into the grieving of what was lost. And it's painful to open those closed boxes inside of us. And it's painful for us to open to those realities of our failings. Our love is so big inside, we want it to be delivered skillfully, but it's hard and it's impossible for it to be delivered 100% skillfully all of the time. But I think that element of grief and the way that when we can sit with it, we create that ability to have compassion for ourselves, and then it spreads back out, just like you were speaking about, Juanita. That's the key. That's the start for me.
I can't not talk about grief, because I think what better gift than a pandemic to give a culture that has forgotten how to grieve. If we don't know how to grieve, we don't know how to live. And I think part of it is, I love Martine Prachtel's work, who's of Mayan descent. He says, grief isn't sadness, grief is release. When you're grieving the thing that we've lost, we call it grief. But when you're grieving the thing that you've got, we call it praise. He says, because to really know how to praise something, you need to know what would be lost if it was gone. And I think we also think grief requires suffering, and I don't think that's true. I think grief is just sad, but the suffering is the resistance to the grief. It's at least what I found. The other thing is, I think that one of the biggest myths we have around grief is that we all grieve differently, and I don't think that's true. I think we all avoid grief differently, and that story gives us permission to avoid it. But grieving is just releasing and letting your feelings flow through you. And I also think grief requires community, because we'll never go to the bottoms of our grief unless we know someone's holding us and we won't drown in it. And all of those pieces have kept us from grieving. And again, if we don't know, it blocks life, because you get access to things, your emotions, as a sphere. So if you block it at the grief, you're not going to get access to the joy. And so I think it's so critically important, and that, it's something that most of us haven't been taught how to do.
Speaking of grief, did someone else want to speak, or can I just jump in on that conversation? For me, my biggest grief in the realm of the diversity of our world and also growing up in the United States, my biggest grief is the separation of people. You know, I didn't grow up connecting with people of color. That wasn't happening when I was growing up. No way. And unfortunately, I have to say, obviously now as adults, I have relationships with people all over the world, but I didn't have that as a child. You know, I didn't have parents who had people who were from different ethnic backgrounds over for dinner. That wasn't part of my growing up. And as someone who works with teenagers and who's done leadership programs, I have to tell you, those cafeteria tables are still segregated, not only with race, with sexual orientation, with gender, with all of the things. And that is my biggest grief, because I feel the impact of that is that we don't grow up just having authentic relationship with people. That for me is the missing piece. Being authentic. And then we tend to rely, at least in my experience, in connecting. So much of it is this conceptualized talk with each other. We don't feel free. We're uptight. We're nervous. We don't just feel free to be a person. And just to throw in an example, because I just got a text from this person. He's a young man, a family friend. I've known him since he was a baby. Best friends with my son. He's a black man. They're young men now, mixed race kid. And he just finished 4 years as a Marine. He just texted, said he got into a university. So I was happy to hear that. He just turned 23 with my son. Anyway, he said to me, just to share this, he said, you know, I was deployed. This might be of interest to you, Liz. He was deployed in Western Australia for a stint a couple of years ago. He said, oh man, I love the Australians out there. I said, what'd you like about it? He said, they just say shit. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, everyone is so liberal and careful. I can't stand it here. People there, they just said, you're black. What's that like for you? They just said stuff to him. You're mixed race. Some of them, apparently, they're not very familiar with the world. Some of the folks he spoke with, they said, you mean mixed race couples exist? They didn't. But the thing that he was trying to convey to me was people were free to say what was on their mind. And that feeling of authenticity, because if you haven't grown up with people who are different from you, you come with your own worldview. And there has to be room for getting to know each other. And I think that's where the heart connection also happens. So for me, that is the biggest grief, I think, in my life, is that kind of segregation that happened along many areas of my life. And thank goodness changed as I got older.
You know, I'm going to make a little plug for Sidewalk Talk on the heels of that, because I think my favorite moments listening on the sidewalk in my city, anyway, in San Francisco, where I chose to listen because we'd always get a diverse foot traffic on the way to the subway, is on the best days we'd have 8 listeners, so that'd be 16 chairs that we put on that sidewalk, and they would be full. And you would have a businessman in a business suit. You have a person that sleeps on the street sitting next to them. You have a boy with his skateboard sitting next to them. You have a black urban professional coming from her tech job next to them. You have a mother with her stroller sitting down eating her sandwich sitting next to them. And my favorite days were when they would start eavesdropping on one another's conversations, and this did happen. And then they would turn their chairs and they would start talking to one another. And then they'd start giggling. And the next thing you know, it's a circle. And people that would have never talked to each other, this happened one time, they said, give me your phone number, give me your phone, I'm going to give you my phone number. And I mean, I honestly, those moments are what had me keep doing it, because it would stay with me for weeks and weeks after. More importantly, because I'm not serving as in a role of therapist when I'm out there on the sidewalk, my second favorite moments are people that I've listened to. I'm not their therapist. Traci, walking down the street, gives me a big hug. Hi, Vita. Gives me a big hug. Are you going to come see me at my Indian restaurant today? Yes. Another woman named Vivian, I see her in the morning going to my office. She has a huge bag of apples. She owns the flower cart 2 blocks down. She goes, I just picked these from my apple tree. Would you like one? Yes. This is the promise that no more lunch tables. To me, this is why I do this. So sorry, thank you for letting me have the mic and sharing that story.
Once again, thank you for Sidewalk Talk. Bravo.
Yeah, bravo.
If it's okay, can I ask Aryan to share a story? Because he's told me this and I've always been moved by it. Because I think all of you have been speaking about the power to change, right? In some way. And he shares this beautiful story of 2 children who asked him about his gender. And if he can say it quickly, it'll be very, I think, useful for us.
So
You're muted.
I had gone to another city to do my master's in psychology, and I was staying with somebody who I have no idea. And in fact, her maternal family is where I was staying with them for a month before we find a house. I rent an apartment. So, and that house had a 6-year-old child, and the roommate had already sensitized her family members that, and that time I was pre-op. I'm a trans man, but I was a pre-operative. So, but she had told everyone that, he treat him as a man because that's what he is. No questions asked. Like, I also don't know what does that mean. But the point is that does not give you any reason to misconduct with him. So we just all call him Aryan, and we all use he, him for him. So that's how it went. But kids are kids. They see, they understand, and then they want to know, as curious as that they can be. So, and then she also had a cousin, a 6-year-old had a cousin who's a 5-year-old. And probably they must have spoken to each other about, oh, I don't know who this is, and he's little different, he doesn't have beard, and all that. So pre-op, nothing, I was not on transition. So then this girl came to me and told me that, so of course she told in our language, but I'll just translate. And she said, oh, bhaiya. Bhaiya means brother, like elder brother. So she says, bhaiya, can I ask you a question? And I was somewhere sure this is what she wants to know. Like, why are people calling me and treating me as a man? So then I was like, yeah, ask. And then she says, but bhaiya, if you don't feel comfortable, then you don't answer. Not a 60-year-old person have ever told me, given me this agency, what children have given me. Like, if it is uncomfortable, don't answer. People feel entitled to know what my gender is, but children don't. They're just like, tell if you feel like, if not, it is okay. So then she asked me very, very nicely, she asked me, you're a girl or a boy? And in a very little sense, whatever I could explain, I just said that, you know what, my body is like yours, but my mind is of a boy. You know? And then she takes a big pause, and then she tells me, but then what about the heart, bhaiya? And I said that that's also of a boy. And then she says, oh, so that is clear, 2 is more than 1, so you are a boy. And she explained the same thing to that younger sibling also, who came after a while. And she came running to me, bhaiya, I want to ask you a question. And then this girl tells, no, I have already asked him, I will tell you what it is. And she explained in the same words that I did, that his body is like mine, his mind is of a boy, but you know what, his heart is also of a boy, so he's a boy. And then they never ever misgendered me. In fact, they also corrected people who were misgendering me. Like a 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old's father was quite uncomfortable in saying he, him, and my name. So he used to always keep telling me her, she. So in the middle of a huge cafe that we were in, that little girl stood on the pool table where we were playing, and she holds the father's face and says, "I told he is a boy, and he's saying that he is a boy. So why you call him she? And if you do that, I will not talk to you." And this is like in front of 150 people sitting there in the cafe. I had no guts to do that. That 5-year-old had. So I'm like, I had experiences from people who are not educated, like fully educated, like degrees, and I have spoken to, and this my roommate's family whole, everybody is from business class, but are not educated at all. Like class 1, class 2, class 3 is maximum. Like standard 1, standard 2. I don't know how it is called in states, but we call it standard 1, standard 2, standard 3.
Grades,
So
I think, third grade maximum.
yeah, grades like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Nothing more than that, and that too in a vernacular medium, not even English medium. So, and they've never had any problems. They just never asked me why, what. No, you are Aryan, you are Aryan for us. In fact, educated people have told me, "Oh, is this an illness? This is what we know. This is abnormal." Those people never said anything like that. So I've always had very good, like, love and warmth from communities rather than individuals, like highly educated individuals, out, like those high level speaking with their degrees and all this big knowledge.
What
They
a
don't understand.
wonderful example of what Dawn shared before, this noticing of signals, but also freedom in each other's body, but also this embodying of power of this 5-year-old. Like, listen,
Yes.
this is the
Yes.
deal. This is how.
Yes.
And it as we're sharing stories, I just want to add one. So like my kiddo is 12, and 12 is the age that you're looking for what is the group norm, and am I the in group, am I the out group, how do I adapt my behavior. And sometimes before she goes to bed, we do this exercise, and I call it the golden egg. It's actually just like visualization, getting in your body, and then like to listen to that inner voice. And you can also hear in her breath when she really drops in the body. And I would be like, so listen to that voice and speak from that voice. And then I remember this one evening, she said, "You know what? I'm such a gift to the world. But sometimes when I can't get in my body, I forget to unpack it." And that for me is also, we learn so much from kids because that they're still in their body, but especially in this teen age, that she knows the difference, but then like really dropping in your body, because like this curiosity and the connection to the self, to the beings around us, and then to really trust the community around us, because sometimes we're so just in despair of where everything that's going on, that it's just too much to hold on your own. You can't make connections, but then you need others around you to say, "You know what, it's really tough at this moment, but I see you." And if you can't be kind to yourself, let me just be kind to you. And if we will all listen and take time to drop in our inner voice, then it makes it easier.
That is an amazing place to maybe pause, because I'm aware that if we don't pause, we're not going to get to say goodbye. So what I wanted to do is to first say, if there's one more person that says, I just have to speak before we go to goodbyes, and the goodbyes you'll get to speak a little bit more. But does anyone feel called to put their voice in the soup before we move to this next phase? Aryan.
I just had one thing. So when we talk about power, I also feel when people tell me, when some people say it's like this is abnormal or this is not okay, so I generally ask them that, does that mean you will stop loving me? You can think of being, I'm probably abnormal. Okay, I'm mad. But what does that mean? Are you telling me that I don't deserve love from you? Is that what you are meaning to say? So this conversation that somebody is going to decide, okay, I'm accepting, not accepting, I don't think they're doing that. They don't know what they're doing. Because they never had the opportunity to have a conversation when their parents told them that this is not okay, and they could never question. Like, if I'm doing something that is not okay, will my parents stop loving me? So, and that's what we do to each other also, in that fear. So then I just go and ask. So, okay, you think I'm abnormal. So are you going to stop being friends with me? Are you going to stop loving me? Are you going to um, not help me if I need some help? And God forbid if I'm some problem. And then they don't know what to say because they never thought, what do they only mean they don't know? What does it mean? So I think it's um, like it's just my animation. Like I can't explain it in words.
All I know is that it's almost 1:30 in the morning for you where you are, Aryan, and you are very electrified and full of energy now. Oh, Don has to leave in a minute. So Don, do you want to take the mic before you have to leave?
Just to appreciate the forum and everybody here. I got so much out of listening to you. I appreciate the depth of everyone's work. And yeah, I got a birthday call scheduled at 1:30 with my son, so I got to do that.
Thanks, Don, for
you
being
all.
here.
Really, what great work everyone's doing, and what heart. Sorry to have to leave.
That's okay. Thanks for taking care
Thanks,
of you.
Traci.
So I'm wondering, there's a particular way that I end my couples sessions, especially, it's particularly helpful when they're heated, is, would you be willing to turn towards your partner and thank them for something that they did or they said in the session today? And I wondered if there is something that you would like to thank the group for, a person for, nature for, a moment in time, as a way to kind of close our circle today.
I've got one right here. Ariane, I want to thank you for your story. It's just going to make my day the most beautiful day. I'm happy for you that you had that experience. And I'm also just like, I want to be that 5-year-old. And I'm going to wonder how might I be more like her, that I can grab the face of the father and say, hey, I'm going to withdraw my relationship from you if you don't step up. I've loved this. I could just kind of chat with you all and sort of learn from you all and banter around and explore this for hours. I think it's really juicy, and I just feel really lucky to have been here. Thank you so much for the invite, Traci. But Ariane, particularly, thank you for the story. That's really powerful for me. Yeah.
And Liz, to acknowledge that you also got up at 4:30 in the morning to get here at 5 a.m. from Australia. Just wanted to say that too.
Thank you. Pleasure.
I can catch the ball. I think, Traci, you started with inviting us into this conversation and willing to be changed. So I've changed just by listening to you all. this is not slacking, but it's that it's like the Oscars. If I have to name everyone, it takes forever, and we don't have the time. So just know that you all have been amazing, and all the stories and every insight. I've been shaking my head like making a cocktail or whatever because it resonates. A lot of it. So yeah, definitely changed. And thank you all for bringing authenticity, vulnerability, and just openness.
I want to thank Cornita for bringing in that concept of just expecting people to be adults even if they're not there yet. And you had a pithier way to say it, but it made me laugh in the way of recognition. Like, that's of course the truth. That's how people learn to step into that role. And I really appreciated you bringing that in. Thank you. And thank you all for being here and having this conversation with me. I feel so honored to be a part of this.
Yeah, I think I'll go next. I think ever since I wrote to Traci the first time, I feel like there's a synchronicity building. And maybe even before that, like I sometimes joke to some friends that, whatever I didn't get in the family, I get in every other person in the universe. It's like the universe is compensating. And so I feel like it was such a community. We hardly had like a couple of hours, but it felt like a seeness that I think orients us towards each other and makes us do more of this work, I think. And it's so nice to just feel seen and to be able to see others and share power like that, the power of seeing each other too. So I'm just feeling very full and very woo, like, oh, the universe is listening. So that's me.
I'll jump in. First of all, thank you, Traci, for the invitation to be on this call. And also Liz for bringing in more than just us human beings and that, we're the youngest one in the species, in the bunch. So I appreciate that. And then I'll just say as the whole, just a reflection of, of us as older people and not just the young people in the diverse community and having these conversations. My son just graduated this weekend, and out of 97 kids, 30 were from different countries or ethnicities at Earlham. And, so 17 different countries they had represented. And his preschool had kids from 17 different countries. And so just know, like, we're raising kids, but the fact that we have it too is just beautiful for me. So thank you.
Are you going to go, Aryan?
Yes, I think
you then me.
Yes. Thank you for just like letting me be in this. Like, we never had any intro conversation. Like, how you and Sadaf actually had an hour's conversation. So I'm very grateful to have met you all, and I think very few places where I feel like loved and warm. So thank you so much for making this space full of love. So thank you, everyone. And thank you, Traci, especially. Without knowing me, you invited me. So that means a lot.
Oh, we got to know each other, my friend.
Yes.
We're birds of a feather. You know that already.
Yes.
We're smart, Alex. He's not actually bringing his full self here, I assure you. Thank you.
I'm just thinking before I'm saying. Otherwise, generally, I'm no filter.
Like I said, birds of a feather. All right. May I take the ball? Are you ready to throw the ball to me? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate the heart, intelligence. Now I'm being too heady. I'm going to say what I really want to say, not in my head because I'm feeling rushed. Somebody just jumped in that I don't know, so I don't know what that is. You have changed me. And I'm going to say something really powerful about myself. Since I moved to Germany, I've shrunk. I'm living in a culture where I don't speak the language, where I don't talk to somebody in my own language, but once every 4 months outside of my family. And I've shrunk. And I'm frightened a lot. And I don't feel frightened after hanging out with you because you want to know what's really true about me? I have a really big sweetheart, and I'm really fucking powerful like that 5-year-old. I don't have to try to be her. I already am. Truly. Just want to tell you that. Say it out loud. Okay. I hope we do this again. I'm going to propose that maybe it happens again. Just put the seed. Thank you so much for everybody that's going to watch the recording. Everybody's websites are in the comments, or I will go put them there. And this will also come out live on the podcast too. So you can find this on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. And thanks for those of you that have been streaming live on Instagram this whole time. And yeah, just thanks for teaching us, everyone.
Mm.